What led to all this? What enchants people to leave the life they're accustomed to and travel thousands of miles north in search of heaven's floor? Furthermore, when did this pilgrimage begin? The city of Seattle has long played a crucial role as the center of trade and transport. Now, we'll look at how the city's history has largely been impacted by the role it played in the Great Klondike Gold Rush of the late 1800s.
Extra, extra! Gold found in the Klondike! Read all about it!
The headline that started in Seattle and San Francisco soon resonated throughout the world, and the news could not have broke at a more perfect time.
There was 20% unemployment nationwide and hundreds of bank failures.
Upon the arrival of the steamship Portland to the docks of Seattle on July 17, 1897, carrying with it 68 miners and more than a ton of gold, the United States was only beginning to come out of the panic of 1893, which was the worst recession the country had seen to date.
And then you didn't have any umbrellas, you didn't have unemployment, you didn't have any of those things. Food, any of that stuff didn't exist.
The cargo on board the SS Portland and the SS Excelsior, which docked in San Francisco the day prior, would be worth over $1 billion today. This discovery offered hope to people in a failing economy.
It was just an interesting way to come out of a depression.
Only 100,000 people came up here, but millions got off their rear ends and moved just 15, 20 miles, 50 miles west. But finally, that spirit just caught hold of America and Canada. There was a little bit of hope, and it was the gold rush that gave them that.
All they had to do was get up to the Yukon with some very rudimentary equipment, and you had the possibility of being a millionaire with 1 year's worth of work.
A lot of people have restarted their lives after great failure and been able to succeed and to do well and to be happy. Alaska allows you to do that.
Both Seattle and San Francisco saw the excitement of the gold discovery in the Klondike as a means of salvation from their economic struggles over the past 5 years. Both ports began a battle to be the premier outfitter for the trek north, and with the help of marketing genius Erastus Brainerd, it did not take long for Seattle to win the war.
There was a quote that if you wanted to be a part of the Klondike Gold Rush, you needed to be prepared with about a year's worth of provisions.
Erastus Brainerd and the Seattle Chamber of Commerce took that information and used it for all it was worth.
Mr. Brainerd was a master promoter. He wrote honest articles. He wasn't telling any fibs. What he did was send press releases to every newspaper and magazine that had a subscription of over 400 in the United States.
You should have seen the advertising that was going out over the telegraph wires that was erupting in all the newspapers across the United States saying, come to Seattle, your jumping off point for the Klondike, for gold, riches to be had. Just get to Seattle and we'll outfit you and we'll send you north.
The advertising campaign that came out of Seattle was 5 times greater than any other West Coast city's efforts to be the jumping off point to the Klondike.
It worked. It's estimated that about 70,000 people came through Seattle, got geared up, then headed north.
Within hours following Erastus Brainerd's promotional efforts, Seattle had become a household name nationwide. Beginning in the summer of 1897, the economy in Seattle was flourishing.
Wherever you were, anywhere in the United States, you would read about the Klondike Gold Rush.
Klondicitis was spreading like a virus.
Seemingly rational people left their homes and their jobs, if they had jobs, and they just all wanted to rush up here. They got caught up in this mass movement, if you will, to the far north.
If you were trying to make a living catching fish and the fishing was bad and someone told you that they had just discovered gold, what would you be doing the next day?
Even the mayor of Seattle at the time, William D. Wood, turned in his resignation immediately after hearing of the discovery of gold in the Yukon and started his journey north.
There's more to the Seattle history than meets the casual eye.
They were extraordinary people and risk takers and by nature, gamblers and dreamers, as one author called them.
Within 10 days of the SS Portland's arrival, 1,500 miners had already set course to the Great White North.
You could imagine how exciting that would have been for everyone around, and it really made Seattle the city it is today.
After more than a century since the Klondike Gold Rush, Seattle has not forgotten its history and how it became the city it is today.
Seattle's population did grow quite a bit between 1900 and 1910. It tripled from about 80,000 to 240,000.
One contributing factor to Seattle's spike in population is a result of the limited amount of ships embarking for the Klondike. This created a demand for many local businesses, which in turn boosted Seattle's economy with the creation of thousands of jobs.
It really put Seattle on the map. You know, different stores and all kinds of supplies were sold here for people to get on a boat and go try to find their own fortune.
This part of town was perhaps one of the main business districts. There were many hotels in the buildings in the neighborhood, merchants, restaurants, entertainment of one kind and another. It was very easy to arrive by train, find a room, buy your equipment, have it sent down to a particular ship, and then head north.
While gazing off into the vast expanse of an unknown wilderness, all the while being fortunate enough to have secured passage north, only one thing was on the minds of the tens of thousands of men and women who traveled up the Lynn Canal in the late 1800s. Riches beyond their wildest dreams.
Gold was at a premium then, kind of like it is right now. And people were desperate, and gold was like the shining light.
The most popular route to the gold fields was by steamship up to the Skagway area. Then you've got an overland portion that you have to hike, either 32 or 40 miles to Bennett, British Columbia, where you can get onto the Yukon River. From Bennett to the gold fields is 600 miles approximately.
Skagway, Alaska is a small borough at the end of the Inside Passage. It is nestled against a number of jagged and heavily glaciated mountains.
The coastal range of mountains in Alaska is kind of like a wall. There's very few places that you can cross very readily. But there are a few valleys and passes here and there, and that's where Skagway came into play.
Known as the gateway to the Klondike, Skagway acted as a base camp, while the stampeders worked tirelessly to transport their goods over the mountain passes.
They didn't know what they were getting into. All they saw in their eyes was gold.
Most of those folks weren't miners or outdoors folks at all, and then there they were thrust in the middle of nowhere, having to fend for themselves.
Face it, I mean, they had a tremendous trip in front of them. Things were expensive here that they had to buy. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know how to pan for gold once they got there.
A lot of folks thought they'd just be home in a matter of weeks, that getting to the Yukon was a simple thing. That you just scoop up the gold with your bare hands, but the reality was, of course, far, far different.
Misery or agony? That was the choice needed to be made when deciding which of the two trails one would take, crossing over the mountain passes near the Skagway and Dyea area.
And then you'd have to have clothing that would keep you comfortable in as low as 70 below zero. And of course, you'd have your mining equipment with you, which was simply shovel, pickaxe, gold pan, and carpentry tools with which to build the boat, build a cabin, and build some rudimentary mining equipment like a rocker box or a sluice box.
Whichever route the stampeders chose, assuming they chose one at all, would take weeks, if not months, of round trips moving their ton of supplies.
The source of the Yukon River is about 30 miles from Tidewater at Skagway, but the biggest mountains in North America are blocking your way. I wouldn't want to carry 100 pounds up and down a mountain about 60 times over, you know, right?
For this reason, the majority of the stampeders did not make it any further.
Once they got here, they had another 600 miles to go carrying over a ton of supplies with them. Not a lot of them made it up there.
By the fall of 1897, thousands of people found themselves on the beach of Skagway. Directly behind the human anthill, a town was emerging.
You know, with all the shops here in town, there's still a lot of selling to be done. So people are still making money here. Today we tend to call it the visa rush.
Today, Skagway can see up to 10,000 tourists a day during the summer months.
Most tourists, I find, aren't that interested in the history until they get here. And then they're like amazed at what happened in this little town and how the whole world was focused on here for just a few months.
Back in the fall of 1897 and continuing on for a few years, Skagway was anything but a vacation spot. The men and women that found themselves in that region of the world were there for business. Gold was their focus, and struggle their reality.
There were two ways of getting rich during the gold rush. You could dig gold out of the ground, that was one way, but that's a lot of hard work. Who wants to do that, right? The other way was to start a business or provide a service, that kind of thing. And there were people who settled in Skagway to do just that.
If I might offer some advice, if you ever find yourself in the middle of a gold rush, my advice is to open a bar.
It did not take long for the town of Skagway to be seen as little better than hell on earth.
People were overcharging. It was a greedy time.
The lawless nature of the town suggested great opportunity for one notorious conman, Jefferson Randolph Smith.
You know, there's honest businessmen, and then there's dishonest businessmen.
He quickly organized the shadier element in town, if you will.
Come see the Days of 98 show live on stage with Soapy Smith, Alaska's most notorious outlaw.
He got his name, Soapy, from his scheme with selling soap.
I have a new soap. I have a wonder soap. Here is the finest cleansing agent ever brought forth by man's scientific ingenuity. The fruit of many weary months of research and experiment in my own laboratory. Use this soap upon your skin, and it will glow like the moon. Your face will shine with the radiance of 1,000 candles. Is that bald spot growing, sir? Use my soap, and the patriarchal locks once more will adorn your brow.
He'd wrap bars of soap in money, a $100 bill or a $50 bill, a $20 bill, and people would come and buy the soap for an outrageous price because they wanted to win the $100 bill.
I will sell you a bar from these I have already wrapped for the ridiculous price of $5. And you will have the privilege of choosing your own package.
But of course, his men were planted in the crowd, and they would come up and win the money, and so everyone was trying to buy the soap.
He quickly sold out of his soap and quickly disappeared because he knew that all the people would be opening their soap and finding nothing.
Soapy was doing the same thing earlier, and he got kicked out of Colorado, and when he heard about the gold rush, or the discovery of gold up here, he made his way up to Alaska to take advantage of what was going on in Skagway.
No one really knew what to expect as they first stepped off the ship onto the beach of Skagway. Any communication in and out of this town to the rest of the world could take months. In all the confusion, Soapy Smith saw this lack in communication as an opportunity for power and wealth.
He had a famous telegraph that would, people would pay money to send messages home.
Tell them that you got here and you were safe, and they would telegraph back and say that, oh, well, maybe Johnny had just been run over by a horse and needed to go to the hospital, and they didn't have enough money. And
people were told that they could come into his telegraph office and give their gold to the agent there, and it would be, quote, wired back to their home bank. Well, that never really happened.
You know, if they would learn something here in Skagway, if they would learn that you can't trust anyone or anything, well, maybe they would become suspicious of that telegraph company. Suspicious enough to follow that grand and glorious cable out of the back of the office, down over the bank, and into the Lynn Canal where it ends just past the dock.
He had a telegraph station with wires going out of the building and into the woods, and they were just tied off on a tree further up the hill.
Went nowhere, so no one was getting messages out of here.
Basically, he ran a very successful criminal syndicate here in this town.
The town of Skagway was in rapid development. While hotels and saloons were run by profiteers, many restaurants were run by men with icicle feet, whose fare consisted of only their required goods to enter into Canada.
And so a lot of people, when they realized what they're facing, they said, you know what, I'm going home.
Their dreams for riches were over before they began. These men were now only concerned with selling their goods to earn enough money for a ticket home.
From 1897 to 98, over 60,000 people arrived in Skagway in an attempt to get across the border and get into the Yukon.
Well, there is a difference between the two countries as far as law and law enforcement went. In Canada, you had the Northwest Mounted Police, and of course the Canadian government had the codified law. When the gold was discovered, more mounted police were sent up to the Yukon. So on the Canadian side, things were pretty well regulated, whereas in Skagway, it was a little bit loose up there.
It was required by the Northwest Mounted Police that any stampeder entering into Canada must be equipped with 1 year's worth of provisions. This weighed out to about 2,000 pounds. That's 1 ton worth of food and equipment per person.
So that you wouldn't become a ward of the Canadian government.
There are any number of services which my associates and I provide.
Soapy Smith saw yet another opportunity to swindle the stampeders out of their supplies and money.
Like reliable packers, where a man can have his gear reliably packed up over the White Pass for him, and then he can reliably count on its disappearance.
The packers that would bring the gear up to the White Pass would steal a lot of the gear that was going up there. So when the stampeders got up there, they'd have no gear up there.
Upon arriving by ship to the Skagway-Dyea area, it would take around 3 months to transport this amount of gear 30 miles over the mountain passes. By far, the most challenging and infamous section of the Chilkoot Trail was the Golden Staircase. Its final steps led stampeders right to the Canadian border.
The conditions were pretty rough. They were steep. It was hard to climb.
The problem is at the very peak of the gold rush, there were so many people going over.
It was pretty much back-to-back people. It looks like a continuous line of humanity going up the golden stairs.
Like a mass of wild buffalo or bison. They were on a mass stampede. They just had to get to the gold.
All these people had to carry their own year's worth of supplies, about 2,000 pounds worth, over the pass by themselves by relaying it back and forth.
That was usually, 50 trips up the pass.
Each person carrying on an average of 50 pounds on their back, walking on stairs that had been cut into the ice.
That's 3 miles, it's about a 2,600-foot vertical rise, and there are parts of it where you're actually doing scrambling.
When you would deposit your load on the Canadian side, it would be checked off by the Mounties, and then you would slide back down and pick up another bundle and carry it up the stairs.
And there were several places where you could step out of line and rest.
If you fell out of line, if you had to take a break for something, sometimes it would be hours before you could actually get back in the line to start climbing again.
Because everybody was so intent on being the next person up there, and they wouldn't let you in.
There was a lot of competition, basically, to get there first, to get the good claims. So it was pretty hard going.
As the winter months progressed, most people fought the trail themselves, while others hired native packers or utilized the tram system that was developed.
And that was very expensive. The natives were making sometimes up to $100 a day in 1897 and 1898 dollars.
The natives warned stampeders of the real possibility of an avalanche and a bend in the scene.
But the prospectors often didn't have a lot of stock in what the natives were doing.
They were ill prepared. They thought they were going to California. The gold rush had just concluded there, and they thought they were going to be in orange and peach trees.
But they have no idea what's in store for them up on that trail. Dawson City is 500 miles away. And along that trail, the snow is sometimes 20 feet deep. Winds howling 50 miles an hour. Temperatures down to 70 below.
The stampeders, stricken with gold fever, did not listen and continued packing their goods over the pass.
61 people lost their lives at that point.
Most of them that got to the top of the Chilkoot Pass suddenly realized they had another 500 miles of wilderness.
Right from the very beginning, people and companies were trying to find the easiest way to get over these mountains.
There was a number of investors looking to invest, make money in the gold rush. They sent a team to Skagway to see about the possibilities of building a railroad.
And the whole idea was to get people and their supplies over these mountains as quickly and efficiently and as cheaply as they possibly could.
The announcement of a railroad being constructed from Skagway to Whitehorse promised to open several doors, while closing a few in its wake.
Soapy Smith and his gang basically ran Skagway. They had the deputy marshal on the payroll, so the law enforcement that existed turned a blind eye to what was going on.
Basically, Soapy controlled anything going in and out of Skagway. When the railroad came in, that was going to be the new thing, and they wanted to get Soapy out of control so that they can have control of that.
About 500 Skagway citizens, including the legendary Frank Reed, met up to conspire against Soapy's control.
They're in the middle of another one of their meetings. They're trying to decide what to do about me. Decide. Hell, they're armed to the teeth. I think they've already decided. Well, you know what? I decide. And I've decided to put a stop to their whining and their sniveling and their damn secret meeting.
So there were some folks in Skagway who took exception to the way Soapy was controlling the town.
Basically, they wanted to get rid of Soapy, so they were holding a meeting to gather a mass down at the wharf and for support to get rid of Soapy.
Frank Reed thinks he can take this town from me. Not while I live.
Jefferson Winkle!
So Soapy actually went down to talk them out of ganging up on him.
He came down to the front of the wharf with his rifle.
Tried to stop the meeting. Someone got in his way at the wharf and he pushed them off the dock. Frank Reed pulled his pistol. Soapy got off a shot.
And Soapy fired. Frank fired.
Wounded Frank Reed, and 12 days later, Reed was dead. Soapy was shot through the heart.
Soapy had only been here for, what, 8 months before he met his demise. Wasn't even here a year, you know? And yet he has just this huge reputation.
So that was the shootout that ended Soapy's life and also ended his gang's life.
In a single fateful night, Skagway was rid of Soapy Smith's lawless reign.
Problem solved.
The White Pass Yukon Route Railroad affords people the opportunity to travel back in time and follow in the footsteps of the stampeders of long ago.
The railroad was completed in 1899, so the majority of people who were heading into the Yukon for the Klondike Gold Rush were not able to take advantage of the White Pass and Yukon route.
It was a hardship that nobody reckoned, and those times are immortalized by the men and women who are passionate about the preservation of such a great time in history.
Well, like anything, it's a tradition that if you don't maintain it, it's going to be lost.
By the spring of 1898, tent cities have been erected on the shores of Lake Lindeman and Lake Bennett in Canada's British Columbia. The stampeders of the Klondike will continue facing a long road of challenges standing between them and their dreams for riches.
So many thousands of people were willing to leave their homes and their jobs and their families behind for the elusive promise of riches in a place they had really no concept of what they were getting into.
People came to this part of the world to disappear, and you could do that. Get away from the law, bad marriage, the world. A lot of people come to Alaska today to get away from that hustle and bustle of urbanized lower 48.
After 60-plus trips over the Chilkoot and White Pass trails leading out of the Skagway-Dyea area, about 40,000 stampeders have successfully transported their ton of goods to Lake Lindeman and Lake Bennett.
Bennett represents the headwaters of the Yukon River and the beginning of the water portion of the stampeders' trip to Dawson.
Well, they estimate that about 100,000 people started out.
You know, people dropped everything to come here, and very few of them made it.
The rest of the 100,000 who set out on the trail had either returned home or settled in Skagway. About 3 months had passed from the time the stampeders left Seattle and San Francisco until they arrived at the lakes at the head of the Yukon River.
It would take you perhaps a week to get up to Skagway, and then it's going to take you about 3 months to move all of your equipment over the mountains to Bennett.
From there was another 500 or so, 550 miles down to Dawson on the Yukon River. It could take you 4 or 5 months to get to Dawson because you also had to wait for the Yukon River to unfreeze.
While waiting for the Yukon to thaw, it was time for the stampeders to build a boat to transport not only themselves, but their ton of provisions as well.
The Yukon River is actually a very shallow river and very fast current. We're talking about 7 knots an hour in the springtime especially.
And each of them had a year's supply of food, so they had to make fairly large boats.
This is one of the most popular of the designs of boats that left here. They packed everything in boats like this, everything from little tiny boats, almost canoe and kayak-like, to larger boats like this, might have a horse or 2 on it and a whole group of people and all their supplies, up to small steam-powered paddle wheelers that they pulled the components for over the mountain passes.
There were several steamboats that were brought over in bits and pieces, you know, with boilers and engines and a lot of wood.
So if you timed it right, you would be doing this boat building during the winter. In May, usually, is when the ice would go out of the river and you could launch that boat and begin your journey downstream.
People that lived in a big tent here, when they finished with whatever they were eating that was canned at the time, they just toss it down here, and you can see there's a fairly big garbage dump. They used almost pure lead to seal the cans. People who lived on the canned food for any extended length of time could be poisoned by it.
Bennett has maybe the most visible remnants of the stampeders having been on the Chilkoot Trail. Bennett was at its peak, estimated somewhere in the area of 50,000 people.
People had been living a miserable existence in tents scattered all over these mountainsides, building boats so they could float to the gold fields.
Many of the stampeders had absolutely zero carpentry skills. Whipsawing planks of wood to ultimately build a floating craft was completely foreign to them.
I've never built a boat with my bare hands out of green logs. I had to saw myself. That sounds pretty amazing.
It depended on your knowledge and ability. Sometimes you hired people to build the boats for you because you just didn't have the knowledge, but you needed other people to help you.
Not everybody had the carpentry skills or was willing to whipsaw trees into planks to build a boat.
They stripped the hillsides a long way up of all the timber.
And then they would build a scaffolding type of saw pit, basically. It supported the tree, and there was one guy up on the top and one guy at the bottom, and they had this big, huge saw. They sawed the trees into sections, into boards, and then they used those boards to build a boat. It took them several months to do that.
Whether standing above or below the law, the work was so difficult that each man believed he was doing all the work. This led to many arguments.
And so some people broke their partnerships during the boat building process and would depart.
Nobody was fully prepared for the numerous challenges that faced their journey to the Klondike.
A lot of people were not experienced. They didn't know what to expect, but the draw was just too strong. They couldn't say no. So they went up here not knowing what obstacles they were going to face, and that cost them dearly.
But everyone was convinced that there was gold to be had. For the stampeders that were left, nothing was going to stand between them and the promise of riches. Resembling much of Skagway in its early days, Lake Bennett was a booming tent city, offering all the amenities of an established town.
Bennett was a bustling gold rush town, like a lot of gold rush towns that happened through various gold rushes from San Francisco to Colorado. There was always that great hope that people had that they were starting something new and that it was going to be there a long time.
It was reported by a scout of the Northwest Mounted Police that 778 boats were being built at Lake Lindeman, 850 at Lake Bennett, and another 198 at Carcross.
Caribou Crossing, as it was formerly known, because of the large caribou herds that pass through this region.
Within 3 weeks after this report, another 1,200 boats were built. Like worked-up thoroughbreds at the gate of the Kentucky Derby, the Stampeders were anxiously awaiting the spring thaw so they could begin the race to the Klondike.
Some folks actually were pretty enterprising about it. They slitted their whole outfit as far down the river as they could, and once the ice broke, they just kept going.
An armada of nearly 7,000 ships quickly swept through the glassy waters, chasing their dreams for riches. Lake Bennett immediately became the lonely place it once was only a few short months prior.
And of course, afterwards, the city would become a ghost town. People would leave. They just came for whatever economic gold strike, and then they'd leave, and then the city would be left kind of like abandoned.
It lasted really only 3 years until the train was completed to Bennett in 1899, which basically made Bennett and the Chilkoot Trail obsolete.
Everything you see here that has grown back naturally reforested itself since 1898. This is just Mother Nature working to reclaim a site that was really worked over 100 years plus ago. By 1902, except for the old log church on the hillside and a few other buildings, Bennett was virtually gone.
The people who came to Skagway were itching for news of the Klondike.
Many publication companies of the late 1800s sent journalists up north to report on the Klondike Gold Rush. Upon arriving in Skagway and seeing the reality of it all, the majority of those reporters didn't make it any further than a small encampment only 3 miles outside of town.
A lot of journalism going on back then wasn't really accurate and not necessarily as accountable as journalism is today.
There's a great story about this little town that got its name called Liarsville.
It's where all the journalists hung out, right?
Liarsville is a fitting name for the town, seeing as most of the news reports were in fact lies.
It was either the reporters making up stuff or the stampeders coming down and telling lies about it. So they just called it Liarsville because nobody could believe anything that was written about conditions up on the trail.
A lot of them made it out to be a lot easier than it actually was, and they made it seem like it was just, this really quick journey. You go up the hill and, it's a wagon road and you can just go for a ride and it's really easy.
Well, all you had to do was take a nice luxurious cruise up the Alaskan Side Passage, enjoying 12 buffets a day and nightly entertainment. Yeah, arrive in Skagway, then take the smooth wagon road known as the White Pass Trail to the summit.
But this wagon road only went 4 miles up, right? And then just kind of petered out.
What a lie.
Who's to say if more or less people would have embarked on the journey to the Klondike had reliable news stories been sent down to the lower 48 and the rest of the world? But one thing is certain. Those that did attempt the trip would have been far better prepared.
The world was pretty much in an economic depression at the time. So, the myth that you'd walk down the street in the Klondike and pick up gold nuggets would be a big lure to someone who's trying to scratch out a living.
Had the stampeders found themselves on a mountain peak with great visibility, they might have known what was awaiting them on the river. It wasn't more than 50 miles from the launching off point at Bennett that the waters began moving swiftly.
You had men, of course, that were just itching to get to the Klondike. See, they would put together whatever raft they had, and of course, these were not expected. There's no quality proofing.
The stampeders' smooth sailing quickly turned disastrous as the roaring rapids blindsided them.
They would jump on these rickety things of doom and just head to the rapids and smashing on the rocks. Men were lost.
Within days of the ice thaw, more than 100 boats were ripped to pieces, while the unrelenting white water consumed the lives of several passengers.
A lot of people were dying in the White Horse Rapids. There had been a couple hundred deaths and people losing their loads and things like that.
For the ones that survived, their gear was long gone.
Because it was so quick and so rough, they'd end up upsetting and losing all their gear. And so here they were in the middle of nowhere. Even though it is summertime, it's not that long, and they had no supplies.
Sam Steele of the Northwest Mounted Police heard of the dangerous rapids and immediately took action.
Sam Steele was an authoritarian type individual and would take no nonsense.
There was huge fear of loss of life.
He numbered the boats to ensure that they got through the river system safely, and they knew who was coming in and how many.
Sam Steele made it a law that every person passing through the White Horse Rapids had to have an experienced guide.
The rafts and the boats and the canoes and the steamers were piloted through the rapids.
It got so bad that women and children were not allowed on the boats.
They were offloaded at Canyon City and they had to walk the couple of miles, and no one was lost.
Canyon City was a settlement that kind of grew up as stampeders' boats would come in just above the rapids. Folks like, hey man, you better watch out, rapids down below.
Among the experienced pilots guiding boats through the White Horse Rapids was well-known author Mr. Jack London.
When Jack London came, it was at the very beginning of the rush. Just like the tens of thousands of people that came here, he was poor, he was hungry, he was unable to find work. So he tried writing before he came up here. But as he came to the Klondike, in his mind, it was to become a rich gold miner.
This served as an inspiration for many of his famous stories centered around the Klondike Gold Rush.
Well, they had endless challenges.
One enterprising fellow actually made himself a little tramway to bring the boats around, and you paid for the privilege.
And the man was quite clever. He took trees and cut them down, took all the branches off of it, and he had wheels that were the same shape as the tree itself, and he just made a cart and used horses to tow it into town.
The simple yet effective design of the tram system was responsible for saving many lives. The White Horse and Miles Canyon Rapids were nothing to be trifled with, and the tram system, allowed people the opportunity to bypass this dangerous speed bump on their quest.
He would charge 3 cents a pound or $15 for an entire boatload to bring your stuff around.
It was all about very wisely spending what you had. Your bankroll was very precious. So groups of men working together, of course, would debate, should we take the risk? So you had man versus nature. It was just a very, very, very difficult environment.
Today, a small piece of the tram is all that remains in Canyon City, ensuring people never forget the lives that were lost chasing a dream.
They didn't know what they were getting into. All they saw in their eyes was gold.
A lot of folks thought that getting to the Yukon was a simple thing. You just scoop up the gold with your bare hands, but the reality was, of course, far, far different.
Like stampeding buffalo, these stampeders have overcome more adversity than any of them could have ever foreseen.
Dawson City is 500 miles away. And along that trail, the snow is sometimes 20 feet deep. Winds howling 50 miles an hour. Temperatures down to 70 below.
They've dealt with gangsters trying to swindle them out of everything they had. They've triumphed over some of Alaska's highest mountains, defeating the ghastly shadows that awaited their every turn.
Most of those folks weren't miners or outdoors folks at all, and then there they were thrust in the middle of nowhere, having to fend for themselves.
They manufactured floating vessels with their bare hands, which would transport them to the gold fields.
I've never built a boat with my bare hands out of green logs. I had to saw myself. That sounds pretty amazing.
They went up here not knowing what obstacles they were going to face, and that cost them dearly.
After all of that, they stared the devil in the eyes while pushing through the monstrous Whitehorse Rapids.
The Yukon River is actually a very shallow river. Very fast current. We're talking about 7 knots an hour in the springtime especially.
The lure of gold had consumed their very souls, and nothing short of the Grim Reaper himself was going to stand in their way.
People were desperate, and gold was like the shining light. You know, people dropped everything to come here, and very few of them made it.
Now, for the stampeders that survived, there was only one more hurdle between them and their subarctic El Dorado. After the distressing surprise of the Whitehorse Rapids, the men and women on the trail to the Klondike were no longer going to assume the worst was behind them. A wise decision as they approached the final obstacle only 200 miles outside of Dawson.
The Five Finger Rapids are further up the Yukon River, and it was the last piece of really treacherous water between here and Dawson.
Much like the rapids near Whitehorse, the Five Finger Rapids greeted the stampeders with a vengeance.
It's 4 big rocks right in the middle of the river, and the channels are quite narrow. And of course, more rivers join in with the Yukon and make the current run harder and harder. So by the time they get there, it's really moving quite along.
There were 5 different ways to pass through the jagged rocks, only one of which was even remotely safe.
Apparently the right side is the good one. I'll bet they didn't know on the first try, though.
The entire quest from Seattle to this point on the Yukon River separated the men from the boys. Only the valiant remained, and while still on high alert, it was smooth sailing from this point on.
But after that, it's actually not so bad. They say that was the most pleasant part of the trip.
Every man, woman, and child sailing to the Klondike had different expectations for when they arrived.
They had been through a real arduous trip. And, you know, it wasn't just the Chilkoot Trail. They were going through Whitehorse Rapids, Five Finger Rapids, again, contending with the river conditions and whatnot and the cold.
Many were probably expecting to see a glow from the abundance of gold as the confluence of the Klondike River to the Yukon River began to creep over the horizon.
There were rumors at the very beginning that the creek beds were basically just lined with gold, and it was just like a carpet of gold in the creek beds.
Many of them thought that they could just scoop the gold nuggets directly off the ground. And there were even some things written up about, you know, you could pick them off of bushes. Silly, of course.
What they did in fact see was an emerging town.
Well, when people arrived in Dawson, certainly reality hit them in the face.
As they pulled their boats to shore, they were greeted by hundreds of people who had already staked claim in their promised land.
Arriving here, if there was one thing they were going to find out that first day was, hey, all of those best claims, they were staked a long time ago.
You know, if they weren't early, a lot of the good claims were taken.
How could this be? How, after shedding blood, sweat, and tears, could the leading stampeders be too late?
The reality is that the vast majority of these stampeders, when they got to the Klondike gold fields and to Dawson City, they discovered that the majority of the good claims had already been staked by those prospectors who are already in Alaska and the Yukon.
Remember, their journey didn't begin until July 1897, which was 11 months after the discovery of gold in the Klondike. On August 16, 1896, an American prospector by the name of George Carmack, his wife Kate Carmack, her brother Skookum Jim, and their nephew Dawson Charlie discovered huge quantities of gold on one of the Klondike's tributaries.
This discovery of gold took place along a little tiny creek, which was called Rabbit Creek, which isn't a very glorious name. So they very quickly decided to change the name to Bonanza Creek, which seemed to be more fitting.
And the story goes that after dinner one day, Skookum Jim was down at the creek's edge, and he saw what appeared to be pieces of cheese in the creek. Well, it wasn't cheese, it was gold.
The claims were registered the very next day, and the news of this discovery spread like wildfire to the mining camps in the Yukon River Valley.
They went to the tavern and said, well, guess what we found? And they say the next day in the town of 40 Mile, you couldn't find a boat because everyone who had been in the bar that night, including some of the Mounties, had headed upstream to the Klondike to stake their claims.
All of the claims around them were picked up very quickly.
And it was pretty much the prospectors of the town of 40 Mile who got the good claims in the Klondike region.
By the end of August, all of Bonanza Creek had been claimed by miners.
And nearby was an even richer creek, which they would call El Dorado. And these were two of the richest creeks in the world.
By mid-December 1896, word of the riches in Dawson had reached the nearest large settlement in Alaska, Circle City. The Yukon River was frozen at the time, but the prospectors in Circle City were able to reach the gold fields in Dawson by dog sled before all the best claims were taken. It wouldn't be for another 7 months that the story of the discovery reached the outside world with the arrivals of the steamships Excelsior and Portland to the docks of the western continental United States. By the time the first wave of stampeders arrived in Dawson, nearly 2 years had passed since the Klondike gold discovery. Disappointment couldn't even begin to describe the undying sadness felt in their hearts and minds as they saw their golden rug pulled from under them. By the spring of 1898, the town of Dawson grew from 500 to more than 30,000.
There is a saying that 1 million people dreamt of coming up here. 100,000 actually laid plans. 30 to 40,000 would actually arrive here, but only a few hundred would strike it rich.
Hundreds were filled with such bitterness and resentment toward their shattered dreams that they immediately began their journey home.
And many of them would actually set up along the riverbank here above their rafts or boats or scows a for sale sign.
They sold what was left of their equipment, their pickaxes and so on, just enough to get out of the Yukon, go down the river, get to St. Michael at the mouth, grab a steamer back to Seattle or wherever they came from.
But there were others that were more entrepreneurial, and they realized that, you know, these miners, they might need entertainment, they might need baked goods, they might need their laundry or sewing done. Why not stay here and mine the miners?
For tens of thousands, Dawson City was their new home.
They were pretty disappointed, but there were definitely a lot of other ways to make money during the gold rush.
Those that got there and couldn't get a claim worked on other people's claims.
Some of these people, by doing that, would be able to kind of keep their ear to the possible sale of a mine if it came available, and they were able to buy that claim and do fairly well.
Make no mistake, despite the stampeders being too late to stake their own claims, gold was still very prevalent throughout the city. It was now time to get creative for a big piece of the pie. It wasn't long before the feeling of disappointment turned into a feeling of determination. The booming Dawson City was nothing these brave men and women haven't seen before. They've defeated Seattle, Skagway, Bennett, Canyon City, and although the game has changed, they were now ready to take on the final chapter, the Klondike. Extracting gold from the Klondike was a very time-consuming process, but they were fortunate enough to be working the richest creeks in all of the world. A good amount of the new arrivals to Dawson were still captivated by the stories of gold and went to work on other people's claims. The men and women of the Great Stampede to Dawson City came from all corners of the earth and from all walks of life.
We talk about stampeders as if they're all one, but they're not. There are a lot of people who went up there who were merchants and went up to sell goods to the miners, the prospectors.
Imagine if you come to a strike zone and suddenly there's this well-positioned tent with all the goods you need, food, supplies, of course the prices, it's kind of like going to a movie theater with the popcorn, you'll spend a fortune.
People would need goods and services, and so they went up with a view to building a hotel, building a saloon, a hardware store, a restaurant, you name it.
They quickly learned that they could fall back on the skills they already possessed and make a far greater living than anything they've experienced back home.
They would take up their former professions because Dawson was a booming town and we needed tailors and lumbermen and all of the other professions.
Folks like you'd find in any community.
Lawyers or doctors and things like that. There were just the regular old poor people trying to get out of the Depression who thought that maybe this is the way to do it.
Say, for example, if you had a law practice back home and you went to hopefully stake a claim, but it didn't work out, well, it's not a bad idea to open one up here. So
there was the dance hall girls. There was the people who wanted to entertain the miners.
Bartenders, for sure.
There's not a lot of places where you could go and socialize with people, so the bars and saloons really became a very important way for people to get a little bit of that feeling community. You know, talk about what's going on out on the creeks, talk about, you know, your mining, or talk about how lonely you are at home.
This is 1 ounce of gold dust, or flour gold, as some call it. Today, it is valued at over $1,500. While in Dawson City, 1898, this same ounce was worth about $16. In fact, gold quickly became Dawson's primary source of currency.
Just about every business had a gold scale on the counter. They would put a 1 ounce weight on the one side of the scale, and you know, you would shake out 1 ounce worth of gold dust until the scale balanced, and then you'd made your payment.
Whether working on a mine or working in town, everyone was eagerly trying to get their hands on it.
One thing the bartenders used to do, they would, when they were taking your gold dust out of your gold poke to pay for your drink, they would catch some of the gold underneath their fingernails and then rub it through their greasy hair.
You know, so that they could skim off a little extra gold dust for themselves, and they'd rub it into their hair and then carefully clean their hair after work.
They'd go home and wash their hair and pan their shower water for gold.
One guy came over the pass, he had a couple of brooms. You know, it didn't seem like something useful, but nobody else in town seemed to have thought of brought one, so he hired himself out to sweep out the floor of saloons on the promise that he got to keep any gold dust he managed to collect.
When the shop doors locked, all the employees were down on their hands and knees with whisk brooms cleaning up the floorboards and things like that.
Given the remoteness of the Yukon and the limited quantity of supplies, merchants were able to charge outrageous amounts in comparison to similar items in the lower 48.
You could buy a glass of whiskey for $10. Milk was $20. Imagine this, the person who had the first cow in Dawson was doing very well.
Today, an ounce of gold holds enough value to buy over 400 gallons of milk. Back then, 1 ounce merely covered the cost of a single gallon.
But if you had a good claim and could afford that, it was not a big deal.
This implies that there was an incredible amount of gold being extracted from the Klondike. To date, approximately 12.5 million ounces of gold have been pulled out of the Yukon, a value of over $20 billion at today's prices.
With $1,500 an ounce now, it's becoming a recreational sport for people nowadays. They're enjoying it out on the weekends now.
So it's still happening, even today. And people are still coming up here and trying to get rich.
It was required by the Northwest Mounted Police that every stampeder entering into Canada be equipped with 1 year's worth of provisions in an attempt that the town of Dawson would not run short on food. By the time winter was approaching, that year had passed, and all of their food was long gone.
They were already starting to see signs of hunger and starvation. This is like the first year that the people had started to come. There were more people pouring in than food to feed them.
Of course, it was a male-dominated experience, but about 10% of the participants were women. There were families up there. Eventually, schools were established in Dawson City, and we have pictures of children helping out with the mining process.
At one point, Dawson actually blew up to 40,000, which caused a near famine because everything, all the livestock, everything was being eaten quite quickly.
A meal that would cost 50 cents in Seattle was well over $3 in the Klondike. Since the majority could not afford this, most people were surviving on beans for every meal.
Some of these folks were not eating as well as they could. You know, during the year, a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables.
During the winter of 1898, Dawson City was experiencing a huge outbreak of scurvy.
And that, gone untreated, can lead to death too. So scurvy was a big deal.
Scurvy is caused by a vitamin C deficiency and can be avoided by eating fresh fruits and vegetables, a luxury at this time in the Klondike.
Dawson was not a very nice place. There was a typhoid fever epidemic here. Scurvy was rampant.
Even writer Jack London was stricken with this disease, but was fortunate enough to not allow it to consume his life. Instead, he used that experience, along with many others from his adventures to the Klondike, to help immortalize the deprivation inflicted upon thousands of dreamers during that time.
He did no writing here while he was in this part of the country. But it was such an important time. The experiences that he had, the people that he met, the stories that he heard, all of that really became the catalyst to his writing career. And so when he got back home the following year and then started to write again, it was like the stories just came out of him like a fever almost.
His experiences up here was less than a year as well, just like Soapy. But unlike Soapy, Mr. London lived to tell the tale.
When it is 75 below zero, a man must not fail in his first attempt to build a fire. That is, if his feet are wet. If his feet are dry and he fails, he can run along the trail for a half-mile and restore his circulation. But the circulation of wet and freezing feet cannot be restored by running when it is 75 below. No matter how fast he runs, the wet feet will freeze the harder.
Jack London, he got it right? He got it right. He knew how to describe the land.
Many years after he'd become a famous author, he said, "One gets their perspective in the north, I got mine."
So a lot of his novel, like To Build a Fire, White Fang, and other short stories of his very seem to epitomize the romance of the North, were conceived on his adventures here.
On his way up to Dawson City, Jack was known to have wintered in several cabins. But there is a certain cabin that is particularly special.
What makes this cabin so special is that Jack scribbled some graffiti on the back wall in pencil. He scribbled his name, Jack London, miner, author, January 27, 1898.
And down creek, about maybe a quarter of a mile, is the cabin that housed a family that actually saved his life, saved him and his partner from the scurvy.
Unfortunately, not everyone was so lucky. While many were living lavishly and flaunting their newly found fortunes, scurvy, along with other diseases, claimed the lives of over 2,000 that winter.
Please put your hands together and welcome to the stage the fabulous Gold Rush Guy.
For the few that could afford it, entertainment was running rampant in the Klondike.
Place like this, like the Palace Grand Theater, you might come and see a show, and the quality actually increased dramatically over the years as time went by, and they could bring more quality entertainment up here. I guess there was a lot of vaudeville acts going on, which basically just you could conceive as just any disparate elements of performance art you can think of and just mash it all together, throw it up on the stage.
Hey, I started writing a song. Oh, you started writing a song, did you? Yep. Well, what's it called? It's called Meet Me Behind the Rock Crusher, baby.
I mean, they had boxers fighting. They had a guy actually by the name of Long Neck Larry who put a noose around his neck and just kind of hang there, you know, for the delight of the audience. You know, little children come and sing their songs of home in Ireland.
When the weather conditions wouldn't permit mining, the miners would look for any way to entertain themselves.
Just anything to relieve the loneliness and isolation of your life out on the creeks.
It wasn't a glamorous life. It was hard work. There were lots of miners that had gold, and the ones that were poor probably got paid in gold and chucked it up on the stage for the girls because they'd been out in the bush for so long.
There was an abundance of dance halls, saloons, and gambling halls.
Even though gambling is legal around these parts, or was then, the Northwest Mounted Police, today the RCMP, turned a blind eye to the thing, as with prostitution. They felt it was a necessary evil to distract the men. So the Mounties always post a guy in the saloons and bars to make sure the games were kept honest, and that was one of the ways you cut down on the fighting that way.
In fact, during the rush, more fortunes were won and lost in the gambling halls of Dawson City than in the gold fields themselves.
So of course, people that made fortunes didn't keep them very long often. It's kind of like people who win the lottery nowadays. They're not conditioned to handle this amount of money, and so they spend it in very frivolous matters, not having a strategic plan for it. And many miners fell prey to that, where they just assumed that there would be more and more gold, and one day they hit rock bottom, there was nothing there, and they came back pretty much in the same state in which they left.
This would explain why only a handful of people actually left the Klondike with their fortunes.
That's what the gold rush was. It was a world of extremes. People that made fortunes, people that lost fortunes. They had 3 great months, right? Amazing nights, but then afterwards, nothing to retire on.
As the ice in the Yukon River began to thaw in the spring of 1899, Dawson City was still booming. That is, until the news of a new gold discovery was confirmed. Over the winter months, there were rumors that gold had been found near the mouth of the Yukon, north of St. Michael. As the rumors spread, hundreds made the frozen journey 1,500 miles downriver. When the ice cleared and the first sternwheeler arrived at Dawson, the rumors were confirmed. There was, in fact, a major gold strike in Nome, Alaska.
It was like a godsend. Up the Yukon River with the steamboats came word of a gold strike in Nome.
Immediately, thousands of people began fighting for a spot on one of the ships.
If you had gone up to Dawson City for the Klondike, and you didn't have a claim, and then you heard about the discovery at Nome and thought, if only I can get there quickly, then maybe I'll have a chance at having my own claim.
Maybe this would be the opportunity they've been waiting for. Maybe this time they wouldn't be too late for a good claim.
Thousands of people crowded onto those steamboats to head down the Yukon River to St. Michael and Nome, where the gold strike was.
Prior to the confirmation of this new gold discovery, there were still thousands of people wandering aimlessly around the boomtown of Dawson, their hopes and dreams shattered, and for some, destroying their very will to survive.
What's really striking, if you see pictures of the gold rush in Dawson, you see thousands of people walking up and down the streets in Dawson City, and you wonder, what are they doing? Well, that's all they had to do. They had no chance of finding gold ground. The claims were all gone, so they were just milling around trying to imagine what they're going to do next.
Extra, extra, gold found in the Klondike.
They could almost hear that same paperboy voice they had heard a couple years earlier prompting their race to the Klondike. Only this time, they felt they had the upper hand. Although the journey to Nome was about 1,500 miles, it seemed as if they were right around the corner.
It was like a herd of elephants. Everybody charged off down the river to Alaska to follow the elusive gold.
And just as quickly as Dawson filled up, Dawson started to empty out again.
In the blink of an eye, the population of Dawson diminished significantly as an exodus to the new promised land had begun.
Once the news came to Dawson in August of 1899 of another gold strike at Nome, a lot of those people just picked up and left. So it's estimated that in 1 week after that news came in August of 1899, about 8,000 people picked up and left Dawson just like that.
Thousands and thousands of people replicating what happened in Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco when the original word started the strike in the first place. So here we go again, another gold rush.
A lot of those folks were, yes, the more shiftless laborers, folks, the less fortunate, if you will.
There were anywhere from 30 to 40,000 people living in Dawson, and 2 years later, it was all over.
While thousands departed the Klondike upon the news of the new discovery in Nome, many stayed behind under the realization that they were in fact home. In the summer of 1899, the stampeders quickly fled the land in search of new discoveries.
The 40,000 probably went down to about 10,000 as people go off to Nome and the next gold rush.
Around that same time, you had about 3 large mining companies coming into the Dawson area and buying up the small claims holders.
You know, the town sort of reinvented itself. Big machine mining started to come in, the dredges.
Massive dredges were transported to the rich creeks and were operational for decades. To this day, the remains of the beasts are still standing. Dawson City has a population of more than 4,000, many of which are late descendants of old-time miners.
They'll never stop prospecting. They'll never not stop from digging. Because gold is where you find it. It's not there, it's where you find it.
There are people like John Gould, who was born here. There are other places that he has admired, but there's nothing that will replace Dawson for him. And there are many families like that.
John Gould's family has been in this region of the world for the past 100 years, and his contribution to the preservation of the town's history is invaluable.
Dad was there 50 years. I was there 50 years. And my son, who's coming today, was there 25 years. We were 95 years on that one patch of gold.
We still get families every year looking for records because some uncle, some grandfather, some whoever came to the gold rush from all over the world.
Much like the boom towns of Seattle and Skagway, Dawson City is continuing to educate people on such a remarkable time in history. Almost more so with places such as the original cabin from famous poet, the Bard of the Yukon, Mr. Robert Service.
I wanted the gold, and I sought it. I scrabbled and mucked like a slave. Was it famine or scurvy? I fought it. I hurled my youth into a grave. I wanted the gold, and I got it. I came out with a fortune last fall. But somehow life's not what I thought it, and somehow the gold isn't all.
Robert Service's poetry is a clear and accurate representation of the hardships encountered along the Trail of 98.
From the big, dizzy mountains that screen it, to the deep, death-like valleys below. Some say God was tired when he made it. Some say it's a fine land to shun, but there's some that would trade it for no land on earth, and I'm one.
His poetry is kept alive by people like Fred Osen, heritage interpreter for Parks Canada.
To commemorate this sort of thing, there's such a mass movement of people. It really was the last great gold rush. The age of exploration pretty much came to an end with the Klondike gold rush. There weren't too many blank places on the map for people to explore that you could paint with whatever your imagination might conceive, right?
With the exodus of so many miners to Nome, Alaska in the summer of 1899, the Klondike gold rush has officially come to an end.
You know, we're talking about an event that was world news and is so well documented because of the commercial photographers and the newspapers that were here at the time.
I think it's very important. You know, we have to know about our history. We have to preserve our history. Otherwise, in some cases, we may be doomed to repeat it.
And it's important for us to preserve these things just as a testament, for one thing, of the tenacity of these people, the great folly for gold, I suppose.
I can't imagine that we would ever see that again. It's a huge episode, certainly in Canadian history, in Northern history, and in Alaskan history.
Just important to learn these lessons, to understand how other people live their lives and what we might relate to that for ourselves today, for the benefit of all Canadians, all citizens, for many generations to come.
It was early spring 1899 that the new Stampede was steadily moving toward Nome. sternwheelers moved down the Yukon, pushing their way to the golden oasis. Hope was once again restored as the struggles the stampeders endured began to fade away. As the thousands of men and women from the Klondike arrived in Nome, they were greeted by a small town filled with hundreds of miners who had already staked claim on most of the available creeks in the region. While gazing off over the horizon of the Bering Sea, contemplating life as they knew it, a miracle was about to occur. Upon arriving on the beach of Nome in the summer of 1899, only weeks after learning of gold's discovery on Anvil Creek, they were quickly informed that all of the claims in the region had been staked. News of this nature in the past had been devastating for some. But now, as they gaze off over the horizon, reliving their past, they realized that it was never disappointment or failure that drove them to this place. Instead, it was their passion for freedom and adventure. Passion they never knew existed until the news of $1 million in gold reached the docks of Seattle and San Francisco 2 years prior.
Extra, extra! Gold found in the Klondike. Read all about it.
That spirit just caught hold of America and Canada. There was a little bit of hope, and it was the gold rush that gave them that.
Seemingly rational people got caught up in this mass movement, if you will, to the far north.
They quickly left their jobs and their families and were placed in the middle of a stampede for the Klondike.
Oftentimes men came up here leaving their families behind to either get the gold or to new beginnings.
They didn't know what they were getting into. All they saw in their eyes was gold.
Upon reaching the first stop on their journey, it didn't take long for them to realize they were on their own. They had been thrust into a lifestyle they knew nothing about.
A lot of folks thought that getting to the Yukon was a simple thing. You just scoop up the gold with your bare hands, but the reality was, of course, far, far different.
The snow is sometimes 20 feet deep. Winds howling 50 miles an hour. Temperatures down to 70 below.
Aside from dealing with con men in Skagway, the Stampeders' first true test of character came when they were greeted with the Golden Staircase.
That's 3 miles. It's about a 2,600-foot vertical rise.
Each person carrying on an average of 50 pounds on their back. It looks like a continuous line of humanity going up the golden stairs.
They were on a mass stampede. They just had to get to the gold.
Defeating this obstacle proved that these were not the same men and women that left Seattle. They were beginning to discover something within themselves that they didn't know existed.
A lot of people have restarted their lives after great failure and been able to succeed and to do well and to be happy.
But the journey was far from over.
So they went up here not knowing what obstacles they were going to face, and that cost them dearly.
Some say it was greed that drove these men and women north, perhaps at first. But as they advanced further along the treacherous trail, camping on the frozen wilderness, coming together to manufacture boats to carry them downriver, they were purely driven by an overwhelming sense of adventure and a will to survive.
I've never built a boat with my bare hands out of green logs. I had to saw myself. That sounds pretty amazing.
They pushed off down the Yukon River in the midst of an armada of ships, an unprecedented sight that will never be witnessed again.
You had men, of course, that were just itching to get to the Klondike. They would jump on these rickety things of doom and just head to the rapids and smashing on the rocks. I mean, men were lost.
These unexpected rapids surely tested their fortitude. The whitewater claimed many lives, while leaving others stranded far from civilization.
They had endless challenges.
For those who endured on, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. They saw the golden streets of Dawson glowing over the horizon.
Well, when people arrived in Dawson, certainly reality hit them in the face.
As they arrived at their promised land, they were greeted with their final test. All of the claims were staked, and they were forced to sit back and watch others extract all the wealth from the ground.
A lot of folks, once they got here, they just simply put a for sale sign on their outfit and turned around to go home. That was enough adventure right there for them.
They spent months trying to figure out what they would do next. They had dedicated such a great part of their lives traveling to this unknown land and felt some sense of entitlement after such a grueling journey.
There is a saying that 1 million people dreamt of coming up here. 100,000 actually laid plans. 30 to 40,000 would actually arrive here, but only a few hundred would strike it rich.
It wasn't until they were sitting on the beach of Nome that they fully realized and appreciated the transformation their spirit had endured.
You know, there's that metallic gold. That's one kind of wealth, but there's another wealth which draws people up here too, and that's the wildness of Alaska and the Yukon.
They were different people, better people.
It's the challenge.
The gold rush was more a quest for self than it was for gold.
After a few of the most difficult, rewarding years of their lives, a miracle occurred. One of the stampeders ran their hand through the beach sand of Nome, Alaska, and in it was a tremendous amount of gold. Almost overnight, a tent city erupted covering 40 miles of the beach of the Bering Sea. This time, there was no shortage of good claims. This time, they didn't just find a fortune of gold, they earned it. They finally got their piece of the pie.
They were all trying to get rich, but as I said, in the end, it really wasn't about the gold at all. It's about what they discovered about themselves.
The gold rush was the new beginning for everybody.
Alaska is this kind of a magic place for that. You're in this vast amount of land, and it's humbling, but at the same time, you can find yourself.
All of the gold in the world could not replace the value of the experiences and memories that the stampeders had made along the trail. The beach of Nome, Alaska will continue to provide dreamers the opportunity to find whatever kind of fortune they're seeking for years to come. All of which is accredited to the tenacity of the men and women of the Great Klondike Gold Rush.